The fire crackled and spat embers into the suffocating darkness, while Roland Steele watched the blizzard turn the world beyond the cave mouth into a wall of white death, knowing that without shelter, they would both freeze before dawn. He had been tracking the deer for 2 days through the northern mountains when the storm had descended like a fury from the heavens, transforming familiar trails into treacherous mazes of ice and snow. Roland had barely made it to this shallow cave, his fingers already numb, his breath coming in ragged clouds. He had started the fire with shaking hands, coaxing reluctant flames from damp kindling and the last of his oil. The single wool blanket he carried felt pathetically thin as he wrapped it around his shoulders, but it was all he had. That was when he heard the sound. At first, he thought it was the wind howling through some crevice in the rock. Then he recognized it for what it was, the labored breathing of something alive, struggling through the storm. Roland's hand went to the knife at his belt, his military training taking over despite the cold that made his muscles sluggish. He had fought orcs during his years in the border wars, had seen what their raiding parties could do to frontier settlements. The treaty had held for 3 years now, but old instincts died hard. The figure that stumbled into the cave entrance was unmistakably orcish. Green skin showed through torn clothing, and even hunched against the cold, she was nearly as tall as Roland himself. She collapsed just inside the cave mouth, her body shaking violently. Snow caked her dark hair, and ice had formed on her clothes. She wore only a thin tunic and ragged trousers, completely inadequate for the killing cold outside. Roland's grip on his knife tightened. She had not seen him yet, or if she had, she was too far gone to care. He could see now that she was young, probably close to his own age of 23. Her tusks were small and delicate, barely protruding past her lower lip. Blood stained the side of her head where she had clearly taken a fall. Every instinct screamed at him to be cautious, to keep his distance, to protect what little warmth and shelter he had claimed. The war might be over, but that did not erase 6 years of training that had taught him to see orcs as the enemy. But Roland had also been raised by a mother who believed that mercy was not weakness, and a father who had died protecting a wounded comrade. He looked at the orc girl shivering on the cold stone, watched her try and fail to push herself up, and made a decision that would change everything. "Can you move?" His voice echoed harsh in the small space. The orc girl's head snapped up, her amber eyes wide with shock and fear. She tried to scramble backward, but her limbs would not obey. "Please," she managed through chattering teeth, "I will leave. I did not know anyone was here. You will die if you go back out there." Roland kept his voice level, though his heart hammered in his chest. "Come closer to the fire before you freeze." She stared at him like he had spoken in a foreign tongue. "You are human, and you are dying of cold. We can discuss the finer points of interspecies politics after we both survive the night." Roland unwrapped the blanket from his shoulders and held it out. "Take this." "Why?" The word came out sharp with suspicion. "Because I have a fire and you do not. Because that storm is going to kill both of us if we do not work together." He thrust the blanket toward her again. "Take it." The orc girl's eyes darted between Roland's face and the offered blanket. Her whole body trembled now, violent shakes that spoke of dangerous cold. Finally, desperation won over caution. She crawled forward on hands and knees, moving with painful slowness, until she could reach out and take the blanket with shaking fingers. "Thank you," she whispered. Roland moved closer to the fire, feeling the immediate bite of cold without the blanket's protection. He had his leather coat and wool shirt, better than what she wore, but the temperature was still dropping as night fell and the blizzard intensified. He fed more wood to the flames, grateful that he had gathered a decent supply before the worst of the storm hit. The orc girl wrapped herself in the blanket and inched closer to the fire. In the growing light, Roland could see her more clearly. Her face was long and angular, with high cheekbones and a strong jaw. Her skin was the color of new spring leaves, marked with darker patterns along her temples that might have been tattoos or natural markings. Ice crystals clung to her eyelashes. She was beautiful in a way that caught him off guard, though he tried not to think about that. "I am Kara," she said after a long silence. "Kara of the Ironridge clan, or I was before they cast me out. Roland Steele, former sergeant in the King's 5th Infantry." He poked at the fire with a stick. "What did you do to get exercised?" A bitter laugh escaped her. "I protested when our chieftain ordered a raid on a human farming village. The treaty had been signed. We had agreed to peace. But he said humans were weak and would not fight back, and our clan needed the supplies." She pulled the blanket tighter. "I refused to go. I spoke against it in the gathering circle, so they stripped my clan markings and drove me out into the mountains with nothing." Roland studied her face, looking for deception and finding only exhausted honesty. "When was this?" "3 days ago. I have been trying to find shelter, but I do not know these mountains well. Our clan lands are further north." Her eyes met his. "You are wondering if I am lying, if this is some trick." The thought crossed my mind. "I have no weapons, no supplies. If I wanted to harm you, I would be doing a terrible job of it." Kara's expression softened slightly. "You gave me your blanket. You called me to your fire. I have never met a human who would do that. I have never met an orc who opposed raiding human settlements." Roland fed another branch to the flames. "Maybe we are both having a night of firsts." Outside, the wind shrieked like a living thing, and snow whipped past the cave entrance in horizontal sheets. The temperature continued to drop. Roland could see his breath in the air despite the fire, and his fingers were starting to go numb again. Kara was still shivering under the blanket, her lips taking on a blue tinge. They both needed more warmth, but there was no more fuel for the fire than what he had gathered. The cave was shallow, offering some protection from the wind but little else. Roland had been in enough winter campaigns to know what hypothermia looked like, and Kara was showing the signs. For that matter, so was he. "We need to share body heat," he said, keeping his voice matter of fact. "That blanket is not enough for either of us alone, and the fire is not going to cut it tonight." Kara's eyes widened. "I do not think that is wise. It is survival, nothing more." Roland moved to sit beside her, leaving a hand's breadth of space between them. "We sit close, share the blanket, and make it through the night. When dawn comes and the storm breaks, we go our separate ways." She hesitated for a long moment, then nodded slowly and shifted the blanket to drape over both of them. Roland caught the scent of her, earthy and wild with a hint of something like pine. They sat side by side, not quite touching, both staring into the fire. The shared warmth made an immediate difference. Roland could feel the cold retreating slightly, though they were both still far from comfortable. Kara's shivering began to ease after several minutes. "Why did you join the army?" she asked quietly. "My father was a soldier. He died when I was 12, defending a supply convoy from raiders. I wanted to honor his memory, I suppose, and my family needed the coin." Roland shifted slightly, adjusting the blanket. "I enlisted at 17 and served for 6 years, fought in the border wars, saw things I wish I could forget." "Did you kill orcs?" The blunt question hung in the air. "Yes," Roland said simply. "In battle. When they were trying to kill me or my squad mates. I never harmed civilians, and I never participated in the village's burnings that some units did, but yes, I have orc blood on my hands." Kara was quiet for a moment. "My brother died in those wars." He was part of a raiding party that hit a supply depot. The humans were waiting in ambush. Most of the warriors died. She pulled her knees up to her chest under the blanket. I was glad when the treaty was signed. I am tired of death. So am I. Roland stared into the flames. That is why I left the army. Took my discharge pay and was going to head west, maybe find some land to farm. Then this storm caught me. And I ruined your survival plans by stumbling into your cave. You did not ruin anything. We are both still breathing, which is more than we would be managing alone right now. He glanced at her. That wound on your head needs cleaning. Do you have any injuries I cannot see? Cuts and bruises. Nothing serious. Kara touched the blood crusted on her temple. I fell down a slope in the dark, hit my head on a rock. Roland dug in his pack and pulled out a small flask of spirits and a relatively clean cloth. This is going to sting. I can handle pain. But she flinched when he dabbed the alcohol-soaked cloth against the wound. Up close, he could see that her skin had a slightly textured quality, smooth but with a subtle pattern like fine scales. Her eyes were striking, amber with flecks of gold that caught the firelight. It is not too deep, he said, cleaning away the dried blood. Should heal fine on its own. Thank you. Kara's voice was soft. I do not understand you, Roland Steele. You fought against my people. You could have let me freeze. But instead you give me your blanket and tend my wounds. Why? Roland considered the question as he packed away his supplies. Because the war is over. Because I am tired of treating people as enemies just because of what they are. Because you were dying and I could help. He met her eyes. Does there need to be a more complicated reason than that? Most humans would say yes. Most orcs would say yes. Kara pulled the blanket more tightly around them both, and Roland became acutely aware that they were sitting much closer now, their shoulders touching. My people teach that humans are treacherous, that they cannot be trusted, that they will smile while they sharpen their knives. My people teach that orcs are savage monsters who live only to raid and destroy. Roland's mouth quirked in a humorless smile. Looks like both our peoples are full of fear and ignorance. Perhaps. Kara was quiet for a moment. When I was a child, before the wars intensified, there was a human trader who would come to the borderlands. He sold tools and cloth, and he always had sweets for the children. He never treated us like monsters. I remember thinking that if one human could be kind, perhaps others could be too. She traced a pattern in the dirt floor with her finger. Then the wars came, and that trader stopped coming. We heard he had been killed by orcs who did not want humans near our territories. I am sorry. It was a long time ago, but I never forgot him, never forgot that kindness was possible. She turned to look at Roland, her amber eyes searching his face. You remind me of him, the trader. He had kind eyes, too. Roland felt something stir in his chest, an emotion he could not quite name. He looked away, focusing on the fire. I am just trying to survive, same as you. They sat in silence as the storm raged beyond their shelter. The temperature continued to drop, and despite their shared body heat, both of them were still cold. Kara's shivering returned, and Roland could feel tremors running through his own body. We need to get closer, he said reluctantly. Sitting side by side is not enough. Kara nodded, her teeth chattering too hard for speech. They rearranged themselves so they were facing each other, the blanket wrapped around both of them. Roland put his arms around her, and after a moment's hesitation, she did the same. They huddled together, sharing warmth in the most efficient way possible. It should have felt awkward or dangerous, holding an orc woman like this. But all Roland felt was the desperate need for warmth and the strange comfort of another living being in the deadly cold. Kara's head rested against his shoulder, and he could feel her breath against his neck. Tell me about your family, she murmured. My mother runs a small inn in the southern provinces. She has a sharp tongue and a soft heart. My sister married a carpenter last year. I have a younger brother who is studying to be a clerk. Roland shifted slightly, trying to find a more comfortable position. What about you? My mother died when I was young. My father was the clan's war master until he fell in battle. I have 2 younger sisters and the brother who died in the war. Kara's voice grew softer. They all agreed with my exile, said I brought shame to the family by opposing the chieftain. Only my youngest sister cried when they sent me away. I am sorry. That must have hurt. It did. It does. She was quiet for a moment. But I could not participate in breaking the treaty, could not raid innocent people just because our chieftain wanted glory and plunder. If that makes me a coward or a traitor, then so be it. That does not make you a coward. It makes you honorable. Roland found himself running his hand along her back in a soothing gesture, the way he might comfort a frightened animal. Takes more courage to stand alone for what is right than to follow the crowd into wrong. Kara lifted her head to look at him, her face only inches from his. In the firelight, her features were soft, almost vulnerable. You are a strange human, Roland Steele. You are a strange orc, Kara of Ironridge. He managed a small smile. Maybe that is not a bad thing. She studied his face for a long moment, her amber eyes moving across his features like she was trying to memorize them. Then she laid her head back down on his shoulder, and they held each other through the long, cold night. The storm howled and the fire burned low, but together they kept the worst of the cold at bay. Roland dozed fitfully, waking every hour or so to feed more wood to the flames. Each time he stirred, Kara would shift in his arms and he would feel the solid warmth of her body against his. Somewhere in the darkest hours before dawn, with the storm still raging and both of them half asleep, Roland realized that this orc woman felt right in his arms, that holding her did not feel strange or wrong or dangerous. It felt natural, like something that had been waiting to happen. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it just made him hold her a little closer. When dawn finally came, the storm had blown itself out, leaving the world buried in fresh snow that sparkled like diamonds in the early light. Roland stirred first, his body stiff and cold despite the shared warmth. Kara was still asleep in his arms, her face peaceful for the first time since she had stumbled into the cave. He did not want to wake her, did not want this strange, impossible night to end. But the fire had burned down to embers, and the temperature in the cave was dangerously low. They needed to move to find better shelter or make their way to civilization. Kara, he said softly, shaking her shoulder. We need to wake up. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then sharpening as she remembered where she was. For just a moment she smiled at him, a soft, unguarded expression. Then reality set in and her walls went back up. The storm has passed, she said, pulling away from him. The loss of her warmth was like a physical blow. Yes. Roland stood, every muscle protesting. He moved to the cave entrance and looked out at the transformed landscape. Snow had drifted high against rocks and trees, and the trail he had been following was completely buried. We need to find our way down the mountain. Do you know this area? Kara joined him at the entrance, the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. Somewhat. There is a pass to the east that leads down to the lowlands. It is difficult but possible even with the snow. How far? Half a day's travel, maybe less if the way is clear. She looked at him. You do not need to come with me. You have done enough already, more than I had any right to expect. Roland turned to face her fully. You have no supplies, inadequate clothing, and you are still recovering from yesterday. I am not sending you out there alone. I am not your responsibility. Maybe not, but I am not going to let you die after we spent all night keeping each other alive. He moved back into the cave to gather his belongings. Besides, We are heading in the same direction. Makes sense to travel together. Kara watched him with an unreadable expression. You know that if we are seen together, there will be consequences. Humans do not take kindly to those who consort with orcs. Neither do my people look fondly on those who befriend humans. Then we will be careful. Roland slung his pack over his shoulder. Can you walk? She nodded, though he could see the exhaustion still written on her face. He took the blanket and wrapped it around her like a cloak, securing it with a piece of cord from his pack. It was not proper cold weather gear, but it was better than the rags she wore. They set out into the snow, Roland breaking trail and Kara following in his footsteps. The morning was brutally cold but clear, the sun glinting off the endless white. Every step was an effort, pushing through drifts that sometimes came up to their knees. By midday, they had made it down from the highest peaks and into a forested valley where the snow was not quite as deep. Roland called a halt near a frozen stream, and they rested against a fallen log while he divided his meager rations between them. Hard biscuits and dried meat were not much of a meal, but they were both grateful for the food. Where will you go? Kara asked between bites. After we reach the lowlands. West, like I planned. There are frontier settlements that need skilled workers and land grants for veterans. Roland gnawed on a piece of jerky. Start fresh somewhere that the war does not hang over everything. That sounds nice. A fresh start. Kara's voice carried a note of longing. What about you? What will you do? She shrugged, but he could see the worry in her eyes. I do not know. I cannot return to my clan. Other orc settlements will not take in an exile. I cannot live among humans. She stared at the frozen stream. Perhaps I will find some isolated place and make a life alone. The thought of her living alone, cut off from both her people and his, made Roland's chest tighten. That is no life. It is the life I have. Kara's voice was matter of fact, but he heard the pain beneath it. They finished eating in silence, then continued down the mountain. The way grew steeper and more treacherous as they descended, and several times Roland had to help Kara navigate particularly difficult sections. Each time he took her hand or steadied her arm, he felt that same strange awareness he had experienced in the cave, like a current passing between them. As the afternoon wore on, the forest grew denser and the temperature slightly warmer. They were approaching the lowlands, where the mountains gave way to rolling hills and farmland. Roland knew that once they reached that boundary, their strange partnership would end. Kara would have to go her own way, and he would continue west. He found himself dreading that moment more than he wanted to admit. They made camp that evening in a small clearing, using fallen branches to build a lean-to shelter and starting a fire with Roland's tinderbox. Kara proved surprisingly skilled at winter survival once she had the basic tools, showing him how to weave pine boughs into insulation for the shelter and find dry wood even in the snow. We learned these things young, she explained. The northern winters are harsh. Those who do not know how to survive them die. They sat by the fire as darkness fell, sharing the last of Roland's supplies. Tomorrow they would reach the lowlands and would need to find food or make it to a settlement. For tonight, they had shelter and warmth in each other's company. I have been thinking, Roland said carefully, about what you said earlier, about having nowhere to go. Kara looked at him, her amber eyes reflecting the firelight. Yes, the Western Territories are wild, frontier land. People there do not care as much about the old prejudices because they are too busy trying to survive and build new lives. He chose his words carefully. An orc living on the frontier would be unusual but not impossible, especially if she had someone to vouch for her. Kara went very still. What are you saying? I am saying that you do not have to be alone, that maybe we could travel west together. The words tumbled out faster now that he had started. I know it is mad. I know all the reasons it would not work. But we kept each other alive through that storm, and I think we would work well together. You have skills I lack, and I have resources you need. We could help each other start fresh. You are offering to let me come with you. Kara's voice was barely above a whisper. I am offering partnership. Companionship. A chance for both of us to build something new. Roland met her eyes. I know we barely know each other, but I do know that you are honorable and brave, and that is more than I can say about most humans I have served with. Kara stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she smiled. It transformed her face, softening the hard angles and making her look younger, more vulnerable. You are either the kindest man I have ever met or the most foolish. Probably both. Roland felt a grin tugging at his own mouth. Is that a yes? It is a yes, Kara laughed, a sound of pure relief and joy. I will travel west with you, Roland Steele. We will build this new life together and see where it leads. They shook hands on it, the gesture formal and somewhat ridiculous given everything they had already shared. But it felt right, like they were sealing a pact that mattered. That night, they slept in the lean-to shelter with the fire burning low nearby, wrapped in the single blanket with the ease of practice now. Roland lay awake for a long time, listening to Kara's steady breathing and feeling the warmth of her body against his. He had gone into those mountains alone, planning to start a solitary new life in the West. Now he had an orc woman as his traveling companion, and somehow that felt like the best decision he had ever made. The next morning, they broke camp and continued their descent. By noon, they had reached the edge of the mountains and stood looking out over the rolling lowlands. In the distance, Roland could see the smoke of cooking fires rising from what was probably a farming village. We need to be careful, he said. If they see you, there could be trouble. Kara nodded, pulling the blanket up to cover her distinctive features. I will stay hidden while you gather supplies. We can meet outside the village. They made their way carefully through the winter landscape, staying to the tree line. As they drew closer to the village, Roland could make out individual buildings. It was a small settlement, maybe 30 structures clustered around a central square. Not large enough to have a garrison, which was good for their purposes. He left Kara hidden in a grove of bare trees and made his way into the village. The people were wary of strangers but willing to trade when he showed his coin. He bought food supplies, a second blanket, and a thick cloak that would fit Kara. The merchant who sold him the cloak gave him an odd look, but did not ask questions. Roland was heading back toward the edge of the village when he heard raised voices from the square. Curious, he moved closer and saw a crowd gathering around a merchant's wagon. The merchant, a portly man with an impressive beard, was gesturing wildly while speaking to a group of villagers. I am telling you, I saw orc tracks not 2 miles from here, fresh ones from this morning. The merchant's voice carried clearly. The treaty means nothing. They are scouting us, planning another raid. Roland felt his stomach drop. He needed to get back to Kara and warn her, get them both away from here before panic led to violence. But as he turned to leave, a rough hand grabbed his shoulder. Roland spun to find himself facing a broad-shouldered man with a militia armband. You look like you have seen some fighting, the militiaman said, eyeing Roland's bearing and the way he carried himself. We could use experienced men if there is going to be trouble with orcs. I am just passing through, Roland said carefully, not looking for a fight. No one is looking for a fight, but we need to protect our homes. The militiaman's grip tightened. The captain will want to speak with you. Verify you are who you say you are and not some orc spy. Roland bit back a curse. Being detained now when Kara was waiting for him in the woods was the last thing they needed, but causing a scene would only make things worse. Fine. Lead the way." He let himself be escorted to a larger building that served as the village hall. Inside, a grizzled man who was clearly the militia captain looked up from a map spread across a table. "Found this one trying to leave in a hurry," the militiaman reported. The captain studied Roland with sharp eyes. "Name and business." "Roland Steele, formerly of the King's 5th Infantry." "I am traveling west to the territories." Roland kept his voice level and respectful. "I stopped only to purchase supplies. 5th Infantry." The captain's expression shifted slightly. "You fought in the border campaigns, 6 years." Roland met the older man's gaze steadily. "Took my discharge after the treaty." "What do you know about orc movements in this area?" "Nothing. I have been traveling through the mountains. Saw no one until I reached this village." It was not quite a lie, but it felt like one. The captain studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "The merchant is probably jumping at shadows. We have had no orc sightings in over a year, and the treaty has held." He waved a dismissive hand. "You are free to go, but if you see anything suspicious, report it." "Of course." Roland wasted no time leaving the building. The sun was already past its peak, and Kara would be worried. He collected his purchases and made his way back toward the grove where he had left her. She was exactly where he had left her, pressed against a large oak tree with her eyes scanning the tree line. When she saw him, relief flooded her features. "I heard shouting from the village," she said quietly. "I thought they had found you. Close. A merchant saw orc tracks and got everyone stirred up. The militia detained me briefly, but they let me go." Roland handed her the cloak and supplies. "We need to move now while they are focused on the village defenses. Put this on." Kara wrapped the heavy cloak around herself, pulling the hood up to shadow her face. With her distinctive features covered, she could pass as human at a distance. They set out immediately, moving west through the farmlands and keeping to the less traveled paths. For 2 days, they traveled like that, avoiding main roads and larger settlements. Roland taught Kara how to move less conspicuously, how to lower her eyes and hunch her shoulders to appear less tall and imposing. She was a quick study, and soon she could pass through a hamlet without drawing more than a casual glance. At night, they would make camp in secluded spots and talk by the fire. Roland found himself telling her stories from his childhood, sharing memories he had not thought about in years. Kara, in turn, told him about life in her clan, about the traditions and stories of her people. "We are not all raiders and warriors," she explained one evening. "We have poets and craftspeople, farmers and healers, but those are not the ones that humans see. They only see us when we come in war. I think I understand that now." Roland poked at the fire with a stick. "In the army, all we heard were stories about orc savagery, about villages burned and people killed. We never heard about orc families or orc children. You were just the enemy. And we heard the same about humans, that you were weak and treacherous, that you would smile while planning betrayal." Kara pulled her knees up to her chest. "I wonder how many wars are fought because both sides refuse to see the other as people. Too many." Roland looked at her across the fire. "I am glad I met you, Kara. Glad I got the chance to see past the stories." She smiled, that same soft expression that made his heart do strange things. "I am glad, too, even if it took a blizzard and near death from cold to make it happen." They laughed together, and Roland realized that somewhere over the past few days, something had shifted between them. It was not just companionship anymore, not just survival. There was a warmth when he looked at her, a tightness in his chest when she smiled. He was beginning to care for her in a way that went beyond friendship. The thought should have frightened him. Humans and orcs did not form romantic attachments. It was unnatural, forbidden by both societies. But when Kara laughed at one of his jokes, or when their hands accidentally brushed while setting up camp, Roland could not bring himself to care about what society thought. On their 5th day of travel, they reached a crossroads where a weathered sign pointed west toward the frontier territories. The land here was wilder, less cultivated. They saw fewer farms and more open country. This was the edge of civilization, where people came to escape their pasts and build new futures. "This is it," Roland said, looking down the western road. "Once we cross into the territories, there is no going back. Are you certain you want to do this?" Kara stood beside him, her hood thrown back now that they were far from prying eyes. The wind caught her dark hair, and her amber eyes reflected the afternoon sun. "I am certain. I have nothing to go back to anyway, only forward. Then forward it is." Roland adjusted his pack and started down the western road. Kara fell into step beside him, and together they walked toward their uncertain future. The territories were everything Roland had heard and more. The land was beautiful but harsh, with vast forests and rolling plains that seemed to stretch on forever. They passed through small settlements where frontier folk eyed them with curiosity, but did not ask too many questions. Here, a person's past mattered less than their ability to work hard and survive. In a town called Riverbend, Roland used the last of his discharge pay to purchase a land grant. It was not much, just 40 acres of forest and meadow along a small river, but it was theirs. They spent a week in town gathering supplies and equipment, and Roland introduced Kara as his business partner to anyone who asked. Some people looked at her with suspicion when they realized she was an orc, but others were more accepting. The frontier bred a different kind of person. Roland was learning. One less concerned with old prejudices and more focused on survival and prosperity. They traveled to their land on a bright spring morning, the world green and alive after the winter snows. The property was wild and overgrown, but Roland could see its potential. There was a cleared area near the river that would be perfect for a cabin, and the forest would provide timber for building and fuel for the winter. "It is beautiful," Kara said, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "I cannot believe this is ours." "Ours," Roland agreed, liking the sound of the word. "We will build a home here, a real home." They set to work immediately. Roland had some construction experience from his time in the army, and Kara proved surprisingly skilled with tools once he showed her the basics. They felled trees and trimmed them into logs, dug a foundation, and slowly began raising the walls of a cabin. It was hard, exhausting work, but there was something deeply satisfying about it. Roland would look up from notching a log to see Kara working nearby, her strong arms steady as she fitted boards together, and feel a sense of rightness that he had never experienced before. In the evenings, they would sit by the campfire and plan the future. They talked about adding a barn for animals, clearing more land for crops, maybe even trading with the nearby settlements. It was a simple dream, a frontier homestead, but it was theirs. As the weeks passed and the cabin took shape, Roland became increasingly aware of the way his feelings for Kara were deepening. It was not just attraction, though he could no longer deny that he found her beautiful. It was the way she laughed at his terrible jokes, the way she pushed herself to exhaustion working on their home, the way she trusted him completely despite every reason not to. He was falling in love with her, and the realization terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. One evening, about 2 months after they had arrived on the land, they were sitting on the porch of their nearly completed cabin watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air was warm and sweet with the scent of pine and new grass. "Roland," Kara said softly, "can I ask you something? Anything? Why did you really give me that blanket that night in the cave?" She turned to look at him. "You could have kept it for yourself. You would have been warmer and safer. Why did you give it to me?" Roland thought about that night, about the decision that had set all of this in motion. Honestly, I do not know. It just felt like the right thing to do, like I could not live with myself if I let you freeze when I had the means to help. Even though I am an orc, even though we had been enemies. You were never my enemy, Kara. You were just a person in trouble. He met her eyes. And now you are my friend, my partner, the person I trust most in this world. Kara was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. In my clan, there is a tradition. When someone saves your life, you owe them a debt, a bond that cannot be broken. She took his hand, her green fingers interlacing with his. You saved my life that night, and every day since you have given me hope and purpose. I owe you more than I can ever repay. You do not owe me anything. Roland squeezed her hand gently. Everything we have built here, we have built together. We are equals in this, I know, but I want you to understand what your kindness meant to me, means to me. She turned to face him fully. I am not good with words like this, but I need to try. You have become important to me, Roland, more important than I thought any person could be. Roland's heart hammered in his chest. Kara, I need to tell you something. I have been feeling, that is, I think I might. He trailed off, struggling to find the words. You might what? Her voice was gentle, encouraging. I think I am falling in love with you. The words came out in a rush. I know it is impossible. I know there are 1,000 reasons why it cannot work. But when I am with you, I feel more myself than I ever have before. You make me laugh and challenge me and inspire me to be better. And when I think about the future, I cannot imagine it without you in it. Kara stared at him, her amber eyes wide with shock. For a long, terrible moment, she said nothing, and Roland felt his heart sink. He had ruined everything with his confession, pushed too far too fast. Then she smiled, that radiant smile that transformed her whole face, and said, I think I am falling in love with you too. Relief and joy flooded through Roland in equal measure. Really, really. I have been trying not to feel this way, telling myself it was foolish and impossible, but I cannot help it. You are kind and brave, and you see me as a person, not a monster. How could I not fall in love with that? She laughed, the sound bright with happiness. We are both fools, I think. Probably. Roland reached up to cup her face, marveling at the texture of her skin, the warmth of her. But I would rather be a fool in love with you than wise and alone. That might be the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. Kara leaned into his touch. What do we do now? I have no idea. Make it up as we go along. Roland drew her closer. Would you mind terribly if I kissed you? I would mind terribly if you did not. He kissed her then, soft and careful at first, mindful of her small tusks. But Kara responded with an eagerness that matched his own, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck. The kiss deepened, becoming something hungry and desperate, two people who had found something precious and forbidden and were determined to hold on to it. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Roland rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said again, wanting to hear the words aloud. I love you too. Kara's voice was thick with emotion. My strange, wonderful human, what are we going to do? Build a life together. Love each other. Figure out the rest as we go. He kissed her again, softer this time. It will not be easy. People will judge us and hate us for this, but I do not care. I want to be with you. And I want to be with you. Kara pulled back slightly to look into his eyes. We will face whatever comes together, just like we faced that blizzard. They sat together on the porch as the stars came out, holding each other and talking about the future with a new kind of hope. The cabin they had built would be their home. The land they had claimed would be their livelihood. And the love they had found would be their strength. Over the next few weeks, their relationship shifted and settled into something new. They were still partners in the work of building their homestead, but now they were also lovers. They shared a bed in the cabin, held each other through the nights, and stole kisses while working during the day. Roland had never been happier. Every morning, he woke up with Kara beside him and felt grateful for the blizzard that had brought them together. Every evening, he fell asleep listening to her breathing and planning their future. But he knew that their happiness existed in a bubble, isolated on their frontier homestead. Eventually, they would have to face the reality of a world that would not accept their relationship. That reality came crashing in on a hot summer afternoon when Roland was in Riverbend purchasing supplies. He had just finished loading his wagon when a familiar face emerged from the crowd in the town square. Roland. Roland Steele. By the heavens, it is you. Roland turned to see Marcus Raid, a man he had served with in the 5th Infantry. Marcus had been a corporal in his squad, a decent soldier but with a harsh streak when it came to orcs. Marcus. Roland kept his voice neutral. I did not know you were in the territories. Got here about 6 months ago, bought some land south of here. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. I heard rumors that you were in the area, but I did not believe it. Come, let me buy you a drink. We can catch up on old times. Roland wanted to refuse, but doing so would seem suspicious. He allowed himself to be led to the town's tavern, where Marcus ordered 2 ales and launched into stories about their time in the army. Those were good days. Hard fighting, but we knew who the enemy was, not like now with this damn treaty. Marcus took a long drink. Mark my words, the orcs will break it eventually. They cannot help themselves. The treaty has held for over 3 years, Roland said carefully. Maybe it is time to move past the war. Move past? Marcus laughed harshly. How can you move past when you have seen what they do? The villages they burned, the people they killed. Those animals deserve extermination, not peace. Roland felt anger stirring in his chest but kept it controlled. Not all orcs are the same. There are good and bad among them, same as humans. Marcus gave him a strange look. You have gone soft, Steele. I always thought you were harder than that. He signaled for another round of drinks. So what are you doing out here? I heard you bought land near the river, building a homestead, trying to start fresh. Good for you. You doing it alone, or did you find yourself a woman? Marcus grinned. Pretty slim pickings for wives out here, but I am sure a veteran like you can find someone. Roland thought of Kara back at the homestead waiting for him. I have a partner. We are working the land together. A partner. Not a wife, Marcus raised an eyebrow. Well, no shame in that. Take your time finding the right woman. Out here you need someone strong who can handle frontier life. I have found the right person. Roland stood, not wanting to continue this conversation. I should get back. Good seeing you, Marcus. You too. Come by sometime, my land is not far from yours. We can have dinner, you can meet my wife. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder again. It is good to have a fellow veteran nearby, someone who understands. Roland made his excuses and left, troubled by the encounter. Marcus represented everything he had left behind: the hatred, the prejudice, the inability to see orcs as anything but enemies. And now that old life had found him in the territories. He drove the wagon back to the homestead as quickly as he could, eager to see Kara. She was in the garden when he arrived, tending the vegetables they had planted. The sight of her made his heart swell with love and protectiveness. You are back early, she said, standing and brushing dirt from her hands. Then she saw his face. What is wrong? Roland unhitched the horses before answering. I ran into someone from my army days, a man named Marcus Reed. He has land south of here. Kara's expression grew serious. Does he know about me? No. I told him I have a partner working the land, but nothing more. Roland pulled her into his arms. He is one of the worst kind of people, Kara, full of hatred for your kind. If he finds out about us, there will be trouble. Then we will be careful. Keep to ourselves more. She rested her head against his chest. "We knew this would not be easy, I know, but I will not let anyone hurt you or take you from me." Roland held her tighter. "I swear that." They were more cautious after that, limiting their trips to town and always going separately. Kara would stay on the homestead while Roland purchased supplies, and they both avoided situations where they might run into Marcus or others from Roland's past. For several months, it worked. They continued building their life together, adding a barn and a chicken coop, clearing more land for crops. Their homestead was beginning to prosper, and they were happy despite the need for secrecy. Then, in early autumn, Marcus Reed showed up at their door. Roland saw him riding up the path and felt his stomach drop. He quickly found Kara, who was in the barn, and whispered urgent instructions. "Stay here and stay quiet. I will get rid of him." Kara's eyes were wide with fear, but she nodded and retreated deeper into the barn. Roland took a breath to compose himself, then went to meet Marcus. "Marcus, this is a surprise." He kept his tone friendly but did not invite the man inside. "Thought I would ride over, see how you are doing." Marcus dismounted and looked around the property. "You have done good work here." Barn, cabin, garden must have had help with all this. "I work hard," Roland said carefully. "No doubt, but this is a lot for one man in just a few months." Marcus walked toward the cabin. "Your partner around, I would like to meet them." They went to trade in the next settlement. "Will not be back for a few days." The lie came easily, but Roland's heart was pounding. Marcus stopped and turned to look at him with narrowed eyes. "That's so. Because I was just in Riverbend yesterday, and the merchant there mentioned you always come alone, never brings your partner." He took a step closer. "Makes a man curious about who you are hiding out here." "I am not hiding anyone. My partner prefers to stay on the land and work rather than waste time in town." Roland kept his voice level despite the alarm bells ringing in his head. "You are lying to me, Steele." "I can see it." Marcus's hand went to the knife at his belt. "Now I am wondering why. What are you hiding that you are willing to lie to an old comrade about?" Before Roland could answer, there was a crash from inside the barn. Both men spun toward the sound. Marcus started walking toward the barn, and Roland moved to intercept him. "There is nothing in there, just the horses. They must have knocked something over." "Then you will not mind if I take a look." Marcus shoved past him. Roland grabbed his arm. "This is my land. You have no right." "Get your hands off me." Marcus yanked free and drew his knife. "I am just going to look in the barn, unless you have something to hide." Roland knew he had lost this confrontation. If Marcus looked in the barn, he would find Kara. And if he left without looking, he would become even more suspicious and likely return with others. There was no good outcome here. He stepped aside, letting Marcus enter the barn. Kara was standing in the center of the space, her hood thrown back and her green skin unmistakable in the afternoon light. She met Marcus's shocked gaze with her chin held high, defiant and unafraid. "What in the name of the heavens is an orc doing in your barn, Steele?" Marcus's voice was low and dangerous. "She is my partner. We work this land together." Roland moved to stand beside Kara, a united front. "She is not your concern." "Not my concern." Marcus's face flushed red with anger. "You are harboring an orc, living with one. Are you mad?" "I am in love with her." The words were out before Roland could stop them. "Her name is Kara, and she is my partner in every sense of the word." Marcus stared at them both with undisguised horror and disgust. "You are bedding an orc. By the gods, Steele, I always knew you had gone soft, but this is treason. This is perversion. Get off my land." Roland's voice was cold as ice. "Oh, I am leaving, but you better believe I am telling everyone about this, about what you are." Marcus backed toward the barn door, knife still in hand. "You have shamed yourself and every man who served with you. When people hear about this, They will drive you both out of the territories. Then tell them. Tell everyone." Roland took Kara's hand. "I am not ashamed of what we have, and I am not going to hide it anymore." Marcus spat on the ground, a gesture of ultimate contempt, then stormed out of the barn. They heard him mount his horse and ride away at a gallop. Kara turned to Roland, her eyes filled with tears. "He is going to destroy us, everything we have built. Maybe. Or maybe most people will not care as much as Marcus does." Roland pulled her into his arms. "Either way, I meant what I said. I am not hiding our relationship anymore. I love you, and I am not ashamed of that. I love you too, but I am afraid." Kara held him tightly. "I have already lost one home. I cannot bear to lose another. You will not. I promise you that." Roland kissed the top of her head. "We will face whatever comes together." In the days that followed, they prepared for the worst. Roland went into Riverbend to gauge the reaction and found the town divided. Some people were horrified by the revelation of his relationship with Kara, echoing Marcus's disgust. But others were more accepting, arguing that what Roland did on his own land was his business. "You have always been fair in your dealings," the merchant told Roland. "And you have never caused trouble. If you say this orc woman is decent folk, I am inclined to believe you. Thank you." Roland was surprised by the support, however tentative. "Do not thank me yet. Marcus has been stirring up trouble, talking about organizing a group to run you both out." "You should be careful." The merchant leaned closer. "There are people here who support you, but we are not the majority. Watch your back." Roland returned to the homestead with supplies and the warning. He and Kara discussed their options long into the night. They could leave, abandon the home they had built and try to find somewhere even more remote. Or they could stay and fight for their right to live as they chose. In the end, they decided to stay. This was their home, their land. They had worked too hard and come too far to give it up without a fight. 2 weeks after Marcus's visit, a group of about 15 men rode up to the homestead. Marcus was at their lead, and Roland recognized several faces from Riverbend. They were armed with clubs and knives, and their intentions were clear. Roland and Kara met them in front of the cabin. Roland had his old army sword strapped to his side, and Kara held a sturdy staff. They stood together, ready to defend their home. "This has gone on long enough, Steele," Marcus called out. "That orc needs to leave, or we will make her leave. This is my land, bought and paid for with my own coin. Kara is my partner, and she has every right to be here." Roland's voice carried clearly. "You have no authority here. We have the authority of decent people who will not tolerate this perversion." Marcus gestured to the men with him. "Last chance. Send the orc away, and we will leave you in peace." "No." Roland drew his sword. It had been years since he had used it in combat, but the weight felt familiar in his hand. "If you want her gone, you will have to go through me." There was a long, tense moment. Then another horse came galloping up the path, and the crowd parted to let the rider through. Roland was surprised to see it was the merchant from Riverbend, along with several other townspeople he recognized as those who had expressed support. "That is enough, Marcus," the merchant said firmly. "You do not speak for all of us." "What are you doing here?" Marcus demanded. "Making sure there is no violence. Roland Steele has broken no laws. He has the right to live with whoever he chooses on his own land." The merchant looked at the men Marcus had gathered. "And any of you who participate in running him off will answer to the territorial magistrate." "I will make sure of it." Several of the men shifted uncomfortably. The mention of legal consequences clearly made them reconsider. "This is not over," Marcus snarled. "You are protecting a man who betrays his own kind. I am protecting a man's right to live in peace. That is all." The merchant stood firm. "Now I suggest everyone disperse before this turns into something we all regret." Slowly, reluctantly, the men began to leave. Marcus was the last to go, shooting Roland a look of pure hatred before riding away. When they were gone, Roland sheathed his sword with shaking hands. The merchant dismounted and approached. "Thank you," Roland said. "If you had not come when you did." "I meant what I said in town. You have been a good customer and a decent man. That matters more than who you share your bed with." The merchant nodded to Kara. "Miss, I am sorry some of my fellow townspeople were not more welcoming." "Thank you for standing up for us," Kara said quietly. "That took courage, just common decency." The merchant remounted his horse. "But Marcus has a lot of anger in him, and he is not going to let this go. You both should be careful." They promised they would, and watched as the merchant and his supporters rode back to town. Alone again, Roland and Kara returned to their cabin and collapsed onto the bed, the adrenaline draining away to leave them exhausted. "That was too close," Kara whispered. "I know, but we have allies now, people who will stand with us." Roland pulled her close. "We are going to make this work." Over the following months, they did just that. Word of their relationship spread throughout the territories, and reactions were mixed. Some settlers refused to do business with them, but others were more accepting. Slowly, grudgingly, they carved out a place for themselves in the frontier community. Marcus remained a constant threat, spreading rumors and trying to turn people against them. But he never gathered enough support for another confrontation, and eventually he seemed to give up and focus on his own land. Roland and Kara's homestead continued to prosper. They added more animals, cleared more land, and their crops were successful. They traded with sympathetic neighbors and built a network of people who accepted them. One spring evening, nearly 2 years after they had first met in that mountain cave, Roland led Kara to a hill overlooking their property. The sun was setting, painting everything in gold and crimson. Their cabin stood solid and well built, smoke rising from the chimney. The barn, the garden, the fields they had planted, all of it represented the life they had built together. "I have been thinking," Roland said, taking her hands in his, "about the future, about us." "What about us?" Kara smiled, though he could see curiosity in her eyes. "We are already partners in every way that matters. We work together, live together, love each other." He took a breath, nervous despite everything they had already been through. "I want to make it official. I want to marry you, Kara." Her eyes widened in shock. "Marry, Roland, I am an orc." "You are human. There is no priest who would perform such a ceremony, no law that would recognize such a union. Then we will make our own ceremony, speak our own vows to each other, here on our land with the sky as our witness." Roland pulled her closer. "I do not need legal recognition or religious blessing to know that you are my wife in my heart. I just want you to know that I am committed to you for the rest of my life. Will you marry me, Kara?" Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she was smiling and crying at the same time. "Yes. Yes, I will marry you, Roland Steele. I will be your wife and you will be my husband, and we will spend our lives together." They kissed as the sun set behind them, sealing their promise to each other. That night, they spoke their vows by firelight, promising to love and support each other through all the challenges to come. They exchanged simple rings that Roland had crafted from silver coins, and they became husband and wife in every way that mattered to them. News of their marriage spread, as everything did in the small frontier community. Reactions ranged from outrage to indifference to quiet support, but Roland and Kara did not care. They had each other, they had their home, and they had a future they were building together. Marcus Reid, hearing of the marriage, made one final attempt to cause trouble. He rode to the territorial magistrate and demanded that Roland be arrested for crimes against nature. But the magistrate, a practical woman who cared more about law than prejudice, informed Marcus that there was no law against interspecies marriage in the territories. "These are frontier lands," she told him. "We make our own rules here, and we judge people by their actions, not their choice of spouse. Roland Steele has broken no laws. Leave him in peace, or I will charge you with harassment." Defeated, Marcus finally gave up his campaign against them. He remained in the territories, but he kept his distance from their homestead, and eventually the tension between them faded into cold indifference. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Roland and Kara worked their land, traded with neighbors, and built friendships with the more accepting members of the community. They were not completely accepted, and they still faced prejudice and cruelty from some quarters. But they had carved out a life for themselves, a place where they could be together and be happy. 3 years after their marriage, on a crisp autumn morning, Kara told Roland she was pregnant. He was overcome with joy and terror in equal measure, worried about bringing a child into a world that might reject them. But Kara took his face in her hands and said, "Our child will be strong, like both of us, and they will grow up knowing they are loved and wanted." That is more than many children have. Their daughter was born in the spring, a beautiful mix of both her parents. She had Kara's green-tinted skin, though lighter in shade, and Roland's brown eyes. She was perfect, and they named her Alina after Roland's grandmother. The birth of their daughter brought unexpected changes. Some of the neighbors who had been coldest to them softened when they saw Roland carrying his baby daughter, or Kara singing to her in the garden. It was harder to maintain hatred in the face of an innocent child. The merchant from Riverbend brought gifts for the baby and told them that Alina was welcome in his store anytime. Other families with children began to cautiously reach out, and slowly, carefully, Roland and Kara's family became more integrated into the community. It was not perfect. There were still people who hated them, who would always see their relationship as wrong. But there were also people who accepted them, who saw past the surface differences to the love and dedication underneath. 5 years after that desperate night in the mountain cave, Roland stood on the porch of their homestead watching Kara teach Alina how to plant seeds in the garden. His daughter was chattering away, her voice bright with excitement, while his wife patiently explained the proper depth for each seed. He thought about the man he had been before that blizzard, a soldier without purpose, traveling alone toward an uncertain future. That man would never have imagined this life, this family, this profound happiness. The blanket he had given to a freezing orc girl in a cave had seemed like a small thing at the time. Just basic human decency in the face of deadly cold. But that single act of kindness had led to everything that came after: partnership, friendship, love, marriage, family. Kara looked up from the garden and saw him watching. She smiled, that same radiant smile that had captured his heart years ago, and waved. Alina saw him too and came running, her small legs pumping as she raced to throw herself into his arms. "Papa, Mama says the seeds will be tall plants soon." "That is right, little one. We just have to be patient and take care of them." Roland hugged his daughter close, breathing in the smell of dirt and sunshine that clung to her. Kara joined them on the porch, slipping her hand into his. Together they stood and looked out at the land they had built, the home they had made, the life they shared. "You ever regret it?" Kara asked softly. "Giving me that blanket, starting all of this?" Roland turned to look at her, at his wife and the mother of his child, at the woman who had changed his entire world. "Not for a single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. And you are mine." She leaned her head against his shoulder while Alina wiggled in his arms, already eager to get back to the garden. They had faced prejudice and hatred, threats and violence. They had struggled and fought and persevered. And through it all, they had chosen each other, again and again. That night, with Alina asleep in her room and a warm fire crackling in the hearth, Roland and Kara sat together wrapped in a blanket not the same one from that mountain cave, but similar in weight and warmth. They talked about their plans for the next growing season, about repairs needed on the barn, about teaching Alina to read. They talked about all the ordinary, everyday things that made up a life. A happy life. A life worth fighting for. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, indifferent to the small dramas of the people below. But in that cabin by the river, in the heart of the frontier territories, two people who should have been enemies had become lovers, partners, and family. And it had all started with one blanket in a blizzard, given freely to someone in need. A single act of kindness that had blossomed into something beautiful and lasting. A love that transcended the boundaries of species and society, proving that compassion and connection could bridge even the widest divides. Roland looked at his wife and daughter, at the home they had built together, and knew with absolute certainty that he would make the same choice 1,000 times over. The blanket had been small protection against the killing cold, but the warmth they had found in each other had lasted far longer than that single desperate night. It had lasted a lifetime, and it would continue to last for all the lifetimes to come. In the end, that was all anyone could ask for. Someone to keep you warm through the coldest nights, someone to build a life with, someone to love through all the seasons of the years. Roland had found that in the last place he ever expected in an orc girl stumbling through a blizzard, in a shared moment of vulnerability and trust. And from that frozen night had grown a love stronger than any storm, a family bound not by blood alone, but by choice and dedication, and the kind of fierce devotion that only came from facing the world's rejection together. As they sat there in the firelight, wrapped in warmth and love, and the comfortable silence of people who understood each other completely, Roland thought about the journey that had brought them here. Every hardship, every challenge, every moment of fear and doubt had been worth it for this. For the peace of holding his wife while their daughter slept safely nearby, for the knowledge that they had built something good and true in a world that had tried to tell them it was impossible. The fire burned low, and eventually they went to bed, curled together under layers of blankets in the room they had built with their own hands. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work to be done, new battles to fight against a world that still did not fully accept them. But tomorrow would also bring morning light on the river, Alina's laughter as she played in the garden, the satisfaction of good work and shared purpose. Tomorrow would bring all the small joys that made up their life together, and that was more than enough. It was everything. As Roland drifted off to sleep with Kara warm in his arms, his last conscious thought was gratitude for the blizzard that had brought them together, for the blanket he had given without expecting anything in return, for the courage to choose love over fear. In the darkness of the frontier night, their cabin stood solid and peaceful, a light against the wilderness. Inside, a human and an orc slept peacefully, bound together by love and commitment and the certain knowledge that they had chosen right. The story of how they met would become something of a legend in the territories. People would speak of the veteran who gave his only blanket to a freezing orc girl and sat closer to the fire himself. They would speak of the love that grew from that act of kindness, of the family that should not have existed but did anyway. Some would tell it as a warning against unnatural relationships. Others would tell it as proof that love could transcend any boundary. But Roland and Kara did not care how others told their story. They knew the truth of it, lived it every day in the life they had built together. Years would pass. Alina would grow up strong and beautiful, a bridge between two worlds. She would face her own challenges, but she would face them with the strength and wisdom her parents had taught her. Eventually, she would have children of her own, and the family would grow. Roland and Kara would grow old together on their frontier homestead, watching their grandchildren play in the same garden where Alina had played. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and remembering that desperate night in the mountains when their paths had first crossed. And always, always, they would be grateful for the blizzard, for the choice Roland had made to give warmth to a stranger, for the choice Kara had made to trust him, for all the choices that had followed, each one building on the last until they had created something beautiful and lasting. Their love story was not easy or simple. It was messy and complicated and full of challenges. But it was real, and it was theirs, and it was worth every moment of struggle in the end. That was all that mattered. Not the prejudice they faced or the hatred directed at them. Not the obstacles they had overcome or the battles they had fought. What mattered was that they had found each other in the cold and darkness, and they had chosen to stay together through everything that came after. The blanket Roland had given to Kara that night was long gone, worn out and replaced many times over the years. But the warmth they had shared, the connection forged in that mountain cave, remained as strong as ever. And on quiet nights, when the frontier wind howled around their cabin and brought memories of that long-ago blizzard, Roland would pull Kara close and remember. He would remember the terrified orc girl stumbling into his shelter, the decision to help her, the gradual unfolding of everything that came after. He would remember, and he would be grateful for all of it. For every single moment that had led them here to this life, to this love, to this perfect, imperfect happiness they had carved out of a world that told them it was impossible. The fire would burn low in the hearth. The wind would continue its song. And Roland and Kara would hold each other close, two souls who had found their home not in a place, but in each other. Their story had begun with one blanket in a blizzard. It had grown into something neither of them could have imagined. A love that defied boundaries, a family that should not have existed, a home built on the foundation of kindness and trust. And it would continue season after season, year after year, as long as they both drew breath. Because some bonds once forged could never be broken. Some loves once kindled would burn forever. Roland had given Kara his blanket and sat closer to the fire. In return, she had given him her heart, her trust, her life. They had built a future together out of an impossible present, proving that love could bloom even in the harshest winter, even between the most unlikely hearts. And in the end, that was the whole story. The only story that mattered. Two people who chose each other, against all odds and all expectations, and loved each other through everything the world could throw at them. It was a simple story, really. A story about kindness and its consequences, about the way a single choice could change everything. About the transformative power of love. It was their story, and it was beautiful.